Hey friends, so today I'll be going over how I made my 7 of 9 cosplay. All of the face implants are made out of foam and warbler, and the bodysuit is a 4-way stretch silver nylon spandex mix fabric from Fabric Wholesale Direct, which I will link. The fact that Jeri Ryan, the actress who played 7 of 9, liked my tweet of my cosplay made my heart so happy. I feel like I actually did something right in my life for once. But anyway, let's actually get into the video. The first thing that I did was pattern out all of the Borg implants with pencil, and then I went over them with a dark pen and they cut them all out. Bean was pushing a box of screwdrivers onto the paper for some reason. I don't really know why. She is so silly. Why are you so silly? I started with the earpiece by cutting out that circle part out of 6mm foam. I carefully sanded the edges, but I still let it fly around the room for a while because I was not holding on to it tight enough. Next, to get those inner circle details, I used my X-Acto knife and I carved out 2 circles, being careful not to cut through the bottom of the foam. I used some pliers to help hold the small piece of foam to protect my fingers, and I heated up the foam, and that actually opens up those cuts that I made. You can use this method to get like any cool small detailed cuts. I used it on some bracers once and it looked really awesome, so it looked really cool with any armor. Next, I take some scrap warbler and I cut tiny pieces to size. I cut out 15 in total in 3 different sizes. I put them into a tape roll to keep them from flying away. Rolled them up, sanded them. Yes, I sanded each teeny tiny little piece. And then I heated them up one last time to squish them all together since warbler is self-adhering. I did put some insurance of hot glue at the bottom to keep everything together. It is a little messy, but I did go back later and I sanded down each little blob. So for the eyepiece, I marked onto the pattern my initial plan for which section, sorry, my air just turned on, for which section will be the 10mm foam, which will be 8mm, so on and so forth. And then I cut and worked with one piece at a time, starting with the piece closest to the eyebrow. I used 2 pieces of 4mm foam. The piece on top has 4 rectangles cut out. The way I'm doing this is super safe, guys. Yes, please do not do it this way. I did not cut myself, surprisingly. I then heated up to melt any fuzzies and to help open the cuts I just made, and then I sand the 4 rectangles to smoothen them out, and then I heat it up one more time. I'm trying different gluing techniques here, partially because I was running out of hot glue and I just did not feel like going to get more, so I'm using rubber cement to attach the top piece to the bottom. Rubber cement works really great if you're patient enough to let it dry before sticking your pieces together. Next, I use 10mm foam for that cool bumpy section that goes across the eyebrow. As you can see, I'm tracing where each bump is so that I can cut it with my X-Acto knife later. And then here, I'm just making sure not to go all the way through the foam, and I'm just cutting those lines that I made previously. Holding the piece between pliers, I heated up the foam to open those cuts that I made. This actually worked really well. I like the way that it came out. I was using my webcam for this instead of my actual camera, as my camera is getting kind of old and I don't really want to use it for this type of work since I was filming for a really long time, and it does take away from the details, so I'm really sorry for that shit-ass quality. The rest of the eyepiece was built the same way as the top. I used warbler for those really cool blade looking things. I think it turned out really cool. So for the handpiece, I patterned out my hand like I do when making any armor piece, and I put that directly on a paper. I then started with the finger cups by heating up some warbler and sticking it on my fingers once it cooled down a little bit. And then I just wrapped each piece around it and made a somewhat cohesive cup, but it definitely needs some sanding. But yeah, wait for the warbler to cool so you don't burn your little fingers. And then I just sanded each piece. Alright, that is much better, so let's finish the cups by adding a strip of warbler onto the fingertips. After doing that and sanding them down, they look pretty good. The top piece that I'm forming onto my hand right now will actually hold all of the finger parts, which I traced onto 4mm foam. I also checked the fit several times before actually gluing each piece. I glue it to that main part on my wrist, and then I eventually glue it to the finger cup once I'm like, okay, yeah, this will fit. I'm really proud of myself. I didn't have to do any adjusting to this. As you can see, there are a lot of gaps and stuff, so later I add 2 wrist cuffs and a cuff that goes around my upper hand out of warbler. And this just kind of like holds everything down, and luckily she did have like weird pieces that go around her hand anyway, so I was like, this is convenient. Once it is all put together, I sand the edges of each piece, and to get into any small areas I use this tiny sanding bit. There are these really cool vein details that are on top of her handpiece, so I mimicked that by sanding the foam with a small pointed bit. So I do think this came out pretty cool. I'm pretty proud of it. This is before I added that top wrist strap, so it's just kind of floating around in the air right now. Bean, you can't go in there. That's too noisy for right now. I'm sorry. She's trying to like get in this bag and it's so noisy. Anyway, for the emblem, I traced my pattern onto 6mm foam, cut it out, and sanded the edges. The top piece is separated and it sits on top of that Saturn's ring looking piece, and I cut out the details of that, heated it up to melt the fuzzies, and then I glued the two pieces together. Now everything gets a few coats of my favy Plasti Dip. Bean. To prevent the Plasti Dip from clogging up any details, I take a pin and scrape the inside of all the carvings until it is clear. The eyepiece and the earpiece get somewhat of a dry brushing of metallic paint. Dry brushing is a technique where you have a tiny bit of paint onto a fluffy brush and just barely get the color on. I did use a little bit more paint than I normally do when I'm dry brushing, as I did want a silver look to it, but I did want it to look worn, so I wanted some of that black to show through. I was careful not to clog any of the details that I carved in. Any details that did get filled a little too much got scraped out with a pin. The handpiece got a full few coats of silver paint. I noticed her hand implant isn't worn nearly as much as her face implant, so I didn't do much weathering to this other than shading it with some black. Next, I simulated some rust with orange, red, and brown paint all mixed together. Using that same dry brushing technique, I carefully placed the rust onto the outer parts of the piece, kind of copying what I saw on her close-up face photos. I did the same to the earpiece. The Starfleet badge got a coat of silver in the middle, and then gold on the outside. And that's all it for the foam work. I didn't seal in any of the paint. I still have yet to find a clear coat that doesn't mute all of the sheens that the metallics have, so nothing gets a sealer on top. And you know what? That's totally fine. If anything gets chipped off, which it hasn't, I'll just go over it with some more paint. Alright, now it's on to the bodysuit. I won't go over this too much because it's Yaya Han's Bodysuit Pattern, which is the McCall's M7217 pattern. And there are so many tutorials out there on this. So I was missing two pieces from this pattern, as I previously made two bodysuits before this one. So I'm a definite like craft hoarder. I keep literally everything. So I had my first mock-up sitting around and I salvaged the pieces I was missing from that. I also salvaged the zipper from this mock-up. It's not gray, but I really did not feel like going out and getting a gray one, so a black one worked. I put all my pattern pieces onto my fabric, which I always order an extra yard of because I do like having extra fabric, and I cut it all out. I'm also making boot covers from this, so that's another reason why I got some extra fabric. I wound a bobbin with some matching gray thread to prepare for sewing. I really do love sewing. Until there's too much fabric and everything goes wrong, and then there's just way too much in the way, and then it makes me really angry. Okay, time to start pinning stuff and making this thing. Wow, cool sewing montage. Do you guys like my kitten sticker? I'm like super into doll customizing right now, and you have no idea how much I want to actually like make one. They're so cute and like tiny. Their clothes are so tiny. Just imagine like making a teeny tiny t-shirt, and it's like a teeny tiny t-shirt. One quick note, this is the only thing that I actually fucked up on, which was the zipper. I do have an amazing track record with zippers. I don't know why. I'm just like really good at putting them in for some reason. But this zipper, I put it on backwards, so the zipper pull is actually on the inside. Honestly, not too much of a big deal. I just need Mike to help me put it on. But just make sure you're actually paying attention. I was probably watching some doll making stuff and just purely amazed with what these creators can make. I do feel like this pattern is really easy to follow though. I feel like literally anybody could make this. I did make this in 2 days. I had to take a break after I sewed the zipper backwards though. I was like, oh, time to take a break. Alright, so now for the boot covers. I took my comfiest wedges and covered them in stretch wrap and leftover duct tape from my duct tape dummy and marked on the cutting and registration lines, and then I cut it out. I put those patterns onto the fabric and sewed it all together. You can easily do elastic straps at the bottom if you wanted, but I'm extra and just sewed a complete sock to go over my shoe. This can be slippery, so just watch out. You can add foam or whatever to the bottom to kind of rough it up a little bit. But with this, I was able to slide around the science center and it was a lot of fun. Okay, I slid down some hallways and I felt really cool. And that's the completed booty. It's a bit bumpy on the toe because this was before I trimmed the extra fabric on the inside, but it looks really good. I like it. Also, for the Starfleet badge, I used 2 magnets. One got glued to the badge itself and then the other just goes on the inside of the bodysuit. This way I can easily remove it for washing. For the face implants, I actually just used eyelash glue to keep it to my face and it actually worked really well. I was out of spirit gum, so I was like, I'm just gonna use eyelash glue. And that's it. I hope you guys liked this or found it interesting. Please feel free to check out my Patreon full of more behind the scenes stuff and fun lewdy photos. Thank you so much to my patrons, Adam Hunt, Aliar, Anime Crush, Anon, Blue Panda, Daedric Grill, David Rosenbaum, Eric, Jenny Lynn, Jim W, Jordy the Trekkie, Kalika Kaiser, Malwis Murden, Mark, Nathan M, Ninja Ruki, Nanamon, Rob Thompson, Robert Gallardo, Rusty Shackelford, Sakura, Veldemir, and Yandere Dream Girl. Thank you so much and have an amazing crafty day, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!